fellow countrymen and women, I joined the New Patriotic Party at the very beginning of its establishment as a founding member, believing in its core values and the long-standing traditions of its antecedents, predicated on the principles of fairness, equity, probity, accountability, and transparency. I have devoted the best part of my professional career to serving the party, and I still believe in the vision of the founding fathers of the party. However, the NPP, as it exists now, has very little resemblance to the party that I joined in 1992 and helped develop. Thank you. The party has been hijacked by a selected group of party leaders and elders, government appointees, behind the curtain power brokers and some unscrupulous party apparatchiks. The concept of an independent candidate becoming the president of the Republic of Ghana, though novel, will be the most innovative and revolutionary development in Ghana's political history. It will indeed be a watershed development in Ghana. Although similar examples of this model have been practiced successfully in countries such as Benin in Africa and other political jurisdictions. In a country like Ghana, that is currently embroiled in divisive political turmoil, an independent candidate who becomes president will be a bipartisan and honest broker amongst different political parties and will bring healing and reconciliation to our body politic. Ministers and other key government officials will be appointed from all parties and shall also include individuals who are apolitical but have a demonstrable and proven track record of performance in their field of specialization. Fellow countrymen and women, what Ghana needs now is a new leader and not a new political party.
Well, that's the tale of the tape, and that is what the founder of that movement, if you like, has been telling us. He says he's going independent and that it is a movement, that third force that we've been waiting for. And his symbol, the monarch butterfly. Some people have, had their own takes on that matter. But we asked this morning, is this that third force that can create that challenge to the status quo, so to speak, the duopoly of the NDC and the NPP? This independent drive, is that what will lead us there? How much credit will you give this independent candidacy of Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen and put side by side with the NPP and the NDC? Can he pull it off? Is he at some point going to collaborate with the other parties? I mean, he's going independent, but if push comes to shove, where will his interest lie? What do you think on these matters? Well, we get into them with our guest this morning, Dr. Abu Sakara Foster. He is founder of the National Interest Movement. He joins me in the studio. We also have Dr. John Osai-Kwapong, a CDD fellow. Later in the show, we'll connect with our other guests, Ben Efson, a pollster, and Suleimana Brahima, Executive Director, Media Foundation for West Africa. Suleimana has actually joined the conversation. Mr. Brahima, very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Ben. Thank you for having me. I don't know why it appears this morning as a problem with my video. Maybe it's chosen to go independent.
That's a good one. Maybe it's starting a movement against you.
Oh, it has recanted.
It has. Okay. So we have Suleimana now, and Dr. Kwapong, a very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you too.
It's really good to have you. I see that as for you, your connection has not decided to go independent. So
Not yet. It's still with the duopoly.
hopefully not. All right, so gentlemen, we start off with this all-important conversation. I'll start with you, Suleimana. I don't think I've had the opportunity of interacting with you on the independent candidacy of Alan John Kwadwo Kyerematen. What do you make of it? He resigned, from the party. First off, he resigned from his position as trade minister many months ago. Now he's resigned from his party and he's announced his independent candidacy. Is this the catalyst? Is this what is going to spur on change? What do you make of this development? Or is it just political suicide like Afil Moni, former president of the GJA, thinks?
Well, Ben, I think that it's certainly quite a significant development within our national politics. And it is so because, of course, this is not the first time we are having somebody aspiring to contest as an independent candidate and possibly contesting as an independent candidate. We've had in previous elections, people like Kwesi Amoafo-Yeboah in 2008 going as independent candidate, Jacob Osei-Yeboah going in 2012 and 2016 as independent candidate, Alfred K. Walker going in the 2020 elections. And of course, the record shows that so far, none of them was able to make any significant impact. In fact, none of them so far has been able to make even 1% in the national elections.
I think it's in was it 2004 that when there was that grand coalition, I believe they got, was it 1.9% thereabouts? And
I don't know. Well, I mean, if that's in the context of somebody going independent or a political
yes,
party.
I mean, I get it. I'm just looking at the other side, apart from the MPP and the NDC, both independent and then, smaller parties banding together. But you're right, when it comes to the individual independent candidates, it's been a far cry in terms of
exactly, because I mean, if you are looking at people who have gone out of their political parties to form other political parties, in the 2000 elections, for example, Guzi Tano
right,
managed to cross the 1% mark. But it's important to say that you really cannot compare the profile of all these people that I've mentioned who went independent to the profile of Alan Kyerematen. Alan, certainly, whether you like him or not, has been a stalwart in the MPP, has contested on several occasions to seek to become the flag bearer of the party. And until the current or the very recent competition to elect a flag bearer, the record was that the contest has always been between Nana and Alan, and there was always the issue of Alan's camp versus Nana Akufo-Addo's camp. And so the profile of Alan Kyerematen within the MPP, and of course, his name recognition within Ghana is far more than any of these people that I've mentioned. Whether it's Kwesi Amoafo-Yeboah, Jacob Osei-Yeboah, Alfred K. Walker, and any others who had contested previously. There are people who came in and people would say, oh, but who is this person to? Oh, we haven't heard of this person before. But I think that anybody who is a keen follower of Ghana's politics and democracy would certainly have heard about Alan Kyerematen and his place and role within the MPP. Now, does that then mean that Alan would be a major force in the 2024 elections? And my response is that it depends on a number of factors, whether or not Alan will be able to, as for winning, that's something I doubt. But in terms of making an impact, perhaps as a result of him significantly affecting the chances of the MPP, that could be a possibility depending on a number of factors. Maybe as a result of his role taking the elections to second round, that is a probability depending on a number of factors. And what are some of these factors? One, in terms of he chipping away significantly the votes that would have gone to the MPP, I would want to believe that if in the end Dr. Bawumia emerges as the flag bearer of the MPP, look, whether we like it or not, ethnicity is such a major influencing factor in our politics. And if Dr. Bawumia wins, we're going to have two candidates leading the two main political parties, both from the north. And in fact, until the recent divisions, it would have meant that both candidates are coming from what used to be the northern region. And I believe if it happens like that, Alan Tremantin and his campaigners would attempt to exploit the ethnic factor in terms of what they can do, especially in the Ashanti region, and not even broadly in the context of the Akan-speaking areas. But in terms of Ashanti region, I have no doubt that they would try as much as possible to say, look, even if we would not win, we should make a big push to be a kingmaker in the outcome of the elections. And I believe that if that happens, certainly there would be quite a number of people who would go for Alan in the Ashanti region and in other parts where you have predominantly the Ashantis, who traditionally and predominantly are supporters of the MPP. That is one. The other thing is what happens with Kennedy Agyapong in the event Dr. Bawumia emerges as the flag bearer to compete with former President Mahama as the NDC candidate. Again, that represents a different dynamic because from the way things are going, and if you listen to Kennedy Agyapong and the rhetoric and all of that, I don't foresee a situation where he would be able to really and fully reconcile with the party and play a meaningful role in a Bawumia campaign. Because
Are you suggesting that once he's gone down this road, there is literally no turning back, especially as this is his second time stepping away from the party?
No, as for Alan, I really don't see him coming back. I mean, if he were to come back, I think he would lose all, the whatever respect that people have for him. And
you think even that would also whittle away at his credibility?
Exactly, and that would further even perhaps completely kill off whatever is left of his political career and political ambition. So for me, this is a done deal. It's either he decides that he at some point would want to form a political party, even if he wouldn't run as the flag bearer, but maybe just to have his record also going into the political records of our country. But as far as coming back, I think it would take a miracle for him to want to come back to the MPP. And as I said, in terms of Kennedy Agyapong, a man who is now describing the National Council of the MPP as an entity that has now been turned into a hooliganism council, a person who is now saying, look, the MPP is looting the country as if there is no tomorrow and all of that. How would he come back to campaign, for Dr. Bawumia if he wins on the ticket of the MPP? So that again presents a certain dynamic. And whether or not there is any possibility of he joining Alan in that context, I don't know, because given the Ken that we know, I doubt that there could be that kind of an alliance. But as they say in politics, everything is possible. So I doubt Alan can win in 2024, even given all the dynamics in politics and the possibilities of politics. If you look at what happened in Benin, where an independent candidate won, the dynamics were completely different. And again, if you look at the voting pattern of Ghanaians, it's almost like, look, we've made a decision. We don't want to waste our vote. If we think this person has a chance, that's what we are going for. We don't want to, entertain the possibility of wasting our votes. But in the case of Alan, as I've said, in terms of his pedigree within the party and where he comes from, he would attempt that effort to say, look, even if I get a significant number of people in Ashanti region voting for me, there is that possibility that even if I don't win, people will come to me to negotiate for my support in order to maybe win in the second round. And in that case, I can make certain demands and also become politically relevant in the scheme of things. So in a nutshell, this will be my introductory reflections to what is happening.
Right. I'll now go to Dr. John Osai-Kwapong and a number of thoughts to process, basically. This is a fait accompli, if you like. The die is cast as far as Alan Kwadwo Kyerematen is concerned. He's made his decision and he says this is the way he will go, which also presents an interesting shake-up for the political space. It reminds me, if you'll indulge me, of that poem. I'll just read the first and last parts of Robert Frost's The Road Not Taken. I'm sure most of you already know it. Two roads diverged in the yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both, MPP Independent, and be one traveller long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. But the interesting part is the end. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by. And that has made all the difference. I don't know why, but this discussion reminded me of that poem, Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken. So from where you sit, Dr. Kwapong, in the last few weeks after Alan Kyerematen made it clear he was going independent, do you feel it has gathered the sort of moss that a rolling stone would gather in terms of traction and maybe what you would have wanted to see from his camp after all this while? He spelled out a few things. There were accusations, yes, but have you seen what you would have expected from the Alan camp as an prospective independent candidate?
Thank you very much, and good morning to everyone else. So I think what I've observed is he's had quite a number of media engagements, explaining, his position, talking about some of his policy ideas, and also, again, talking about the reasons for his move, etc., etc. So on that, he's definitely trying to get his message across in terms of his independent candidacy. I'm yet to see that full force mobilization, from, district to district or region to region, traveling the length and breadth of the country, making the case for this movement for change and the compelling reason why Ghanaians have to move beyond this NDC MPP duopoly, and then he representing that needed change and break from this tradition that we have of just rotating these two major political parties. I'm sure there are plans to do that, but I just feel like beyond that, I think it was a Monday that announcement was made, that the traction is not as much as I would have anticipated or envisaged, but at least the media engagements are going on, and so I'm sure that's one dimension of a broader strategy that he would engage in. The election is 1 full year away, so I'm sure there's still more time to engage the people of Ghana. As I wrote in the Daily Graphic over the weekend, and I agree with Suleiman Abrahima when he says, in terms of winning, he's uncertain. He's not sure that would happen, but in terms of having some kind of impact whether it's, chipping away at the fortunes of the party he's just left, or some way, somehow becoming a kingmaker should he be able to push this into a second round, becomes the sort of plausible scenarios. I think the Ghanaian voter is interesting. If you look at Afrobarometer, we have a question about do we need fewer political parties, or do we need more political parties so Ghanaians have a real choice in who governs them? And yes, I know Alan's movement for change is not a political party, but I read that data within the context of, do we need other choices outside of this NDC MPP duopoly, right? And between 2002, when the question was first asked, you only had about 52%, about 56% saying yes, we need more parties so Ghanaians have a real choice in who governs them. In the most recent round in 2022, that percentage went up as high as 72%. But the irony for me, though, is that, so here we are saying we could use more choices in who really governs us. In a lot of public conversations, you tend to hear this narrative of, we are tired of this NDC, MPP thing, and we need a third force, etc., etc. But at the same time, in Afrobarometer, when the question is asked about voting intentions, 9 out of 10 always say they are voting within the duopoly, right? Either NDC or MPP.
Right.
And then even if you look at our actual election results too, the best showing of candidates, even combined, whether it was independent and other parties outside of the NDC MPP duopoly, was 2000 round one, where they were able to garner about 7% of the vote. Since then, all combined outside of NDC MPP, they are unable to take any more than even 2% of the vote. Now, someone might say, well, the candidates did not have the political pedigree and stature of Mr. Kyerematen. And there's some merit to that argument. But the other thing that I also then raise as a counter argument is, this is also an independent who is emerging from the deep bellies of the duopoly.
Right.
So how does that also sort of raise some challenges for him, as in how truly independent is this candidature, as opposed to one that has been part of duopoly politics for years and it's sort of breaking away because of certain grievances, with one of the sides of the duopoly. So it's
pretty convoluted, isn't it?
Precisely,
there's no straightforward answer to any of these questions. I guess it's just a matter of time. And like I quoted from Robert Frost's poem, whether when that time comes and in the Yellow Wood there is that forked road where people will actually go and cast their vote, and whether we could see the development of that third force, and maybe even further than that. And we're using Alan Kyerematen as just a starter for this conversation, because we are looking at the broader conversation of independent candidacy in the country. But whether even one good showing, like you mentioned, in 2000, whether one good showing of the smaller political parties or an independent candidacy would even create that third wheel or that third force, that is another question altogether. But hold for me, Dr. Osai Kwapong. Let me bring in Dr. Abusakara Foster. Is a third force even viable in Ghana as of now? Of course, the latest person to suggest that he would go down that road is Alan Kyerematen. So we are giving some prime of place to him. But is that third force, whether political party or independent candidate, is it even viable right now?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to start by expressing our condolences to His Excellency J. Akufo-Addo.
I was going to save those for last, but
First
since
Lady,
you've started.
We thank her for her gracious service as the First Lady of Ghana, and she set a good standard that should be emulated and we pray for healing for our president. It's not easy to lose a lifelong partner. So with that out of the way, I'd like to say that the answer to your question is not whether it is viable, it is when it will come.
When it will come.
Yes, because if indeed there was no space for any other party but only two parties, NDC, MPP as we know it today would not exist because there were several parties before them. And events happened that gave birth to these parties.
So
And
similar events could happen.
Yes, in the analysis of things, we always look along a linear projection. Oh, we've been able to travel from here to here, therefore we must be getting to there. That is true within a certain time frame. But as we all know, the most significant changes that usually come in human experience come from catastrophic events that make rubbish of the linear projections because something really dramatic has happened to change that pattern. And in political landscapes, that's exactly what happens. When you have a duopoly, according to the Vige's law, a multi-party usually results in a duopoly, and then it becomes staid, and it kills itself.
We've also
Are you
seen
with me?
instances like you would find in the United States.
Yeah,
And maybe to some extent
Yeah.
in the UK,
Yes.
where for centuries
Yes.
we have had duopolies,
Yes.
basically. Of
Yes.
course, the UK has a slightly different
Sure.
system, but especially in the United States, we've
Yes.
seen that. And if you talk of these momentous
Yes.
shifts,
yes,
look at the Arab Spring, for example.
yeah.
But that is on the drastic end of the spectrum.
Because it depends
If
on
you
what
look at-
you're talking about. You're talking about the later periods of those countries' evolution and their political evolution 200-300 years afterwards.
Exactly.
How old are you? You're only 60 years. So in that
63.
in those periods, that is when those convulsions happen. If you talk about the UK, the Labour Party was not in the mix. It was the Conservatives and the Liberals. And then something happened, and the Liberals went down, the Conservatives come up. From time to time, there's a breath of fresh air from the Liberals, and they go back again. You talk about Germany, for example, you know, the emergence of the Greens, all of a sudden on the scene. So human institutions...
And that is a bit of an...
Yes.
I don't know whether to call it an exception, especially on the terrain, but the Greens have
Yes.
made some inroads,
Sure.
not just in Germany, but in Europe, cutting across.
And the point I want to make is that nothing stays the same forever. And if you're an analyst and you only look at the linear trends, you're missing the bigger picture. You're not smelling the coffee of when catastrophic events are about to happen and cause a rapid change.
Catastrophic events.
I mean, events that are disruptive of the status quo. That is when people take the other fork in the road. Okay. Now, to finish off on that other fork in the road, what does it stand for? It stands for an alternative political solution to what is current. Okay. So when people talk about independent, you really have to ask them, what kind of independent are you talking about? Are you talking about independent, oh, I tried NDC, MPP, I didn't get, so I'm now independent? Are you with me? Right. Or are you talking independent in the sense that I have a very independent viewpoint to what is currently held in NDC, MPP, and that is what I am standing on. So you cannot just be an independent by label. You have to be standing on something if it is to mean something in terms of offering an alternative political solution. And maybe that is why independents so far have not made that mark, because they are not representing enough of an alternative political solution to what the country needs.
So they are not representing enough of an alternative
I said so far.
So far.
So far.
And I share that sentiment with you. It's a question I'll throw to the others when I get to them, because I've listened to quite a number of these independent candidates. A lot of them have come here on this show. Others we may be yet to speak to others. But I'm saying that by and large, I don't appear convinced by the rhetoric, because oftentimes it is just the same things we've heard with some twists here and there. That is me.
Yes.
But what then do we do to create? Because The rational decision, I think it was Dr. Osai-Kwapong who was mentioning it, according to their surveys, most people would say, we don't want to waste our votes. And so for which reason, they probably would go NPP or NDC, even if they are not the most performing entities. Some people would still go that way because they feel it's one or the other evil, if you like. So then where does that leave this third force argument or discussion that we're having?
I think that everything has its time and place. Yes, we've been in a duopoly for the last 33 years. Each of the two have had 16 years. How they wish to share the successes and the blames, they can argue amongst themselves about that. But as far as the rest of the population is concerned, where we are is the result of where both of you have brought us. And therefore, if we don't like it, we need an alternative solution. The problem I see is simply that as a populace, we say one thing and do another. If you say indeed that you don't like where you are and you want another solution, then you have to be prepared to work towards that other solution. Also, that solution has to be clearly defined so that you can see it. And that is where basically we have been hammering at in the national interest movement. If we are stuck by these roadblocks, how do we remove them? Okay? How does that create an alternative path for us? And what are the things that we need to do in terms of reforms and restoration back to a path where we're working for the good of everybody instead of the benefit of only a few? Now, in that message, we have an automatic choice. And you cannot at that point say, I don't want to do this because I may waste my vote. I think those days are also coming to a finish, because I've also heard several people who said, I'm not going to vote anymore because each time I'm disappointed, so I'm not going to vote.
And now we're hearing many more of those.
And then some people are saying, to be honest with you, some other people are saying, look, I was not going to vote at all, but now that I see Kennedy Agyapong, I'm going to vote.
True.
Now, whether they're going to vote as MPP or they're going to vote for him as an independent is yet another
Whether
issue.
he will also go independent
So,
is another
so I
question.
think until November 4th, there is a whole lot of mixtures. But what it tells you is that finally, the tectonic plates, the political tectonic plates in Ghana, have started to give way due to the pressure of the lava from underneath. And if they don't give way, then we'll have a volcanic eruption. And you know what happens when there's a volcanic eruption. But if they give way, then we'll have different lava flows that brings about different paths. This is not something that somebody causes. It is something that comes from a society over time as a result
It's a
of
groundswell.
habits and disappointments and things like that. So often where our ego makes us think that we are the ones causing the change. But change comes anyway. What is important is that you must have an idea of where you want to go. So when the horse of change is coming, you jump on it and ride
Do
it.
you think we are, very quickly, because I have to get to my other guests as well, on some of the, and I love the analogy, by the way, that tectonic plate shift, because those are the very things that, and the analogy of the lava flowing, because if it doesn't if the shift doesn't happen, if it doesn't find its way, then there'll be the eruption and different streams of volcanic, element running through. But when it comes to this entire bit about the change, the different forces at play, I am just wondering, have we got to that point, that tipping point? All these countries you mentioned, they got to that tipping point before the change came to bear.
Yes.
You've seen the recent protests and the sentiments being shared.
Yes.
Are we at that point?
Well, I think we are probably even past that point.
We are past that point.
Because basically you have to look at the demography of the country.
Right.
And everything tells you that those over 60 are increasingly in the minority,
Right.
and the younger ones are in the majority. And that is where the problems of unemployment, hardship in living standards, and a loss of hope, that is where all these things happen. And if indeed what is said is true, that the living conditions of those at the bottom of the pile are a reflection of the productivity and success of the intelligentsia, then it stands to reason that the elder intelligentsia have failed those people. And it is that failure that is bringing about all the sense of, wanting to see something different radically. And we must respond to that.
Right.
And if people are responding to that, you must get increasingly radical in order for them to associate you with their cause. And to some extent, it's not necessarily Kennedy Agyapong, but his approach is what has made them identify with him.
Right.
Because young people are
Rash.
impatient and they want to see something. Now, I've heard some people say, oh, but he's like Trump. I don't think he's like Trump at all. Trump is selfish. He's not a selfish person.
Do you have
Trump,
a personal relationship with him?
No, I don't. And Trump is very methodical about his bullying approach. This person is actually expressing a defensive mechanism towards the oppression. Now, similarly, he may have an Achilles heel in terms of his nuances of things. But again, there are other people in the political landscape. And that is why when you come to this point, there's a need for a combination of different talents to provide that political solution.
Right. Which then means that, and coming to you, Suleiman Brahima, which then means that we may actually need, not in putting together a third force, we may actually need different forces coming together. Maybe to then go toe-to-toe with the two mainstay political parties. But Dr. Abu Sakara Foster has spoken about viability. I'll come to you on the point of practicality. He says we are past that point already where we need a third force, or where that boiling, percolating force has come. I'd just like to find out from you, in terms of that third force, organization, efficiency, effectiveness, transformation, do we have that at this point in time, which could then give birth to that push we're looking for in terms of a third force? Suleimana.
Well, Ben, I think that I agree with Dr. Abu Sakara in terms of where we are and the dynamics and the points that he raises about Kennedy Agyapong, for example. Now, in terms of, as you put it, organization, efficiency, preparations, to have a third force at this stage, in the context of 2024 elections, I would say no. Unless Ken Agyapong doesn't win and decides that he is going to be into a certain form of coalition. And I still see him as a significant force in this whole exercise because of what he represents and how that resonates with the current situation that we find ourselves in as a country. Across the region, we say, well, democracy is receding, democracy is on the back footing, people have called it the democratic recession and all of that. And the manifestations are not just when you have a coup d'etat, as we have in Burkina, Mali, Niger, and Guinea. The manifestations are in different ways. And if you look here in Ghana, the manifestations are in the form of, citizens losing trust in the political system, the youth feeling so hopeless and helpless, the NDC, MPP, people feeling, look, they are just different in names, but the same in practice and orientation and so on. Over the years, President Kufuor campaigned and won on the back of corruption against the Rawlings regime. The Mills Mahama government won against the MPP on the back of corruption in the Kufuor regime. Akufo-Addo won 2016 on the back of corruption in the NDC. And now, in fact, the issues of corruption perhaps is worse than all those that we
I think we've even heard, from Kennedy himself, who now is an aspirant, talking about that within his own party.
Exactly. So you see, the uniqueness in the Kennedy Agyapong factor is the fact that he is, even as he is still within the party, trying to establish himself as somebody who is different. Look, I am different. Yes, I'm an MPP. I've been with the party since 1992, since its formation. I've contributed to the party significantly. I've been instrumental in any time the party wins an election, but I don't represent what the party is doing. I don't represent the corruption. I don't represent the incompetence. I don't represent the lack of vision. I don't represent just big talk. He says, I've done it. I have employed almost 10,000 people. I'm not a government, I'm not employed by the government. I'm an MP, I'm not a minister, and so on and so forth. So such a person and the messages that he is sending around and the disenchantment and the hopelessness of the majority youth, if he doesn't win and decides that, look, I'm going into an alliance with either Alan or trying to sit down with the PNCs, the CPPs, the PPPs, and all of that, and let's see if we can come together. I foresee a situation where he would say, look, I want to lead, and then there will be that discussions about, or the disagreement on who leads such a coalition and so on and so forth. But otherwise, that certainly would be a major force for 2024.
You speak of a number of matters, just briefly, because Kennedy himself in the political space would not be squeaky clean. He has his own, though he hasn't served in this administration, member of parliament, yes, and everything else in between that we know. I don't need to rehash. But Dr. Abu Sakara Foster was alluding to some of that, the thinking, some people even saying that he can be likened to a Trump, and of course, you know what you picture when Trump is concerned. So that will also have its own clawback, wouldn't it?
You see, Ben, we are at a stage where the response to your question would be, do the masses really care about these things now? They really care about whether somebody is a Trump or not a Trump. They just are fed up with the system. And I ask somebody who says, oh, the guy talks by heart and he says, things anyhow and so on. And I say, okay, so those who have not been saying anything anyhow, and those who don't talk by heart, since 1992, what has been the experience of having those people in power? And that is the question that people would ask you. And people are fed up with, oh, he's a nice person, he's a gentleman, he looks fine, he's a handsome man, and he's a peaceful man, and so on. People want work. People want employment. People want a system that works. People want corruption rooted out. I am not saying that Kennedy Agyapong has all that, but I'm saying that in terms of the rhetoric and how he presents himself out there, he certainly resonates with the aspirations of the masses. And to that extent, he certainly will still represents a major force. Now, it is only when he doesn't win and decides that he's forming a certain coalition that would go against the NDC. At this stage, all indicators point to the fact that whatever is happening is benefiting the NDC in one way or the other. Now, in terms of, again, the third force...
it's a tricky terrain. These are tricky waters to navigate. It's like the Amazon, long and winding and pretty deep. But the point too is that the NDC cannot think too far ahead of itself and think that this is all going to work out for it. Because like you rightly pointed out, if it's Bawumia flag bearership, it comes with a different kettle of fish. If it's a Kennedy, or someone else who and anything could happen, it also comes with different ideas, different sentiments, and all of that. So in the end, even with what has happened to Alan, some people feel the NDC is also going to bleed. So the dynamics are many, and no one can, sit anywhere and say, oh, this is really to our advantage and we are going to benefit from it, so to speak.
No, absolutely. In politics, anything is possible. But of course, you also look at the dynamics and say, if there is any advantage at all, who is the beneficiary? And in terms of what is happening, I don't think, for example, Alan, whatever the case may be, is going to have a significant number of core NDC people saying, we're going to vote for Alan. If anything at all, he's going to chip away whatever the MPP would have been making in, let's say, Ashanti region and a few of the Akan speaking areas. Kennedy Japan, as I said, yes, if he wins, or if he wins to become the flag bearer, I think things are going to be tougher for the NDC than if Bawumia wins. That's my view. And we can have a conversation about that. Perhaps time would not allow for us to go into that. The only challenge would be that whether he would have the party machinery really behind him the way maybe Bawumia would have. But really, does the party machinery at this stage also counts? It does, but it comes with all the credibility issues, all the performance issues, and so on and so forth. 8 years of the MPP. You know, we started with every 8 years there's a change, and you need something special to be able to cross that 8. And so certainly all those dynamics are, conditions that I would say are favorable towards the NDC at this stage. Again, the question about whether there's a third force that is prepared, efficient, and all of that, really at this time, I would say no. And the reason is a third force must not be about elections. So we wait until when elections are about to happen, then we come together and say we want to be a third force. No, it takes an orchestrated preparation, strategic preparations, coming together. And even if it is about 2032 elections or 2028 elections, look, this is the kind of mobilization we are putting together. We want to be a third force or even become maybe a second force in Ghana's political environment. But for it to be like, oh, suddenly because the person didn't win or because certain things have been orchestrated against the person, he has resigned and he can become a third force is a no.
All
and
right.
So that's where we are. And we still have a lot of expectations ahead. And in politics, as I said, nothing is straightforward.
You know, thinking of this, thinking far ahead, also reminds me of the Knesset in Israel and their own unique political situation where things have evolved so much that now the groupings, political groupings, it's literally on knife edge every now and then. And as PM, you can easily lose out based on what policies you're rolling. Just to acknowledge a few of the messages we've seen coming through. This one says, the nation is on a path of decay on all fronts. That is Eli Plim Gebu. And Osman Yakubu Tendana says, I'm watching you live from the Upper West region. Regards to Dr. John Osai Kwapong. I'm going to him next, so I wanted to take that. Benjamin says, lovely crew, making the morning rejoicing, watching with joy. Okay. And this one, Deep Thinker, says, please tell Nanado that Ghanaians are suffering. Well, that's why we're having this discussion about a third wheel in our politics. Dr. Osai Kwapong, so how then can this despondency that is pervasive across the board, wherever you go, even in some government offices themselves, you go and interact with staff there and they are despondent. And you ask yourself, if you people are despondent, then what should the rest of us do? That despair in the political class, is it going to shape or have an impact on this third force, do you think?
Yes. So I think it was Dr. Sakra who said it may be a combination of various forces that come together then to produce this third force. And then when he said that, I started reflecting and saying to myself, yes, it may mean that perhaps there are dissatisfied NDC partisans. There are dissatisfied MPP partisans. There are other political party supporters, those who are unaligned, maybe those who have never even cared, but are now realizing that whether you care or not, whatever happens in the system also affects you. And it would be, a coming together of all of these forces, then that combines to produce this very viable third force, then that challenges the duopoly. But the question of organization, efficiency, and all of that also comes up. Earlier on this year, for the first time, I read in detail the party constitutions for our two major political parties. And I was quite intrigued just to see the administrative structure that they have in place to run these to run their parties. I mean,
Right.
all the way from the smallest political unit,
Pretty
you know,
intricate.
exactly at the polling station, all the way to the national level, and the resources that it even takes to get such an apparatus going. So even when these various forces come together to challenge the duopoly, the organization would be key, and also the resources that they are willing to pull together and invest in such an enterprise would also be key. And I go back to my earlier point. It's still an irony for me that in Afrobarometer, Ghanaians do say, you know, we need something outside of the duopoly because we want more real choices in who governs us. But yet, the political behavior continues to, you know, reinforce this NDC MPP duopoly. But as Dr. Sakrah also said, when the time comes, nothing can stop that third force. Right?
Are we there? He says we're even past that point. Are we there for you?
I'm not seeing, I don't think it's reached that crescendo level for me yet. You're seeing signs of that. You're seeing that in some of the public conversations that we have, but I don't know if it's really hit that tipping point where Ghanaians are ready to make that break away from the duopoly. Real quick, for example, you know, in Afrobarometer, there's a question about, do you feel close to a particular political party? For the first time, those who say they don't feel close to a particular political party is on the rise, right? But then even if you cross-tab that with voting intentions, this group of quote-unquote non-aligned people are still splitting in greater proportions for the duopoly. That's why I'm saying, you know, we may be, you know, there's that sentiment of, we are sort of fed up with these political parties. Even trust in our political parties is very low. But at the same time, we are still intending to go with them anyway. That's why I think that it's not reached that tipping point yet where a third force can, you know, can come in and bulldoze its way and break the stronghold that our two major political parties have on the system. But again, as Mr. Suleimana also said, we'll have to also wait to see how the MPP primary plays out and see what, if Honorable Kennedy Agyapong doesn't win, what he intends to do. Because you also see him, you know, having some kind of appeal within certain, you know, sections of the populace. So I think 2024 promises to be a very interesting and intriguing election.
Well, that's an interesting perspective. I seem to be hearing all of you saying that, and I want to clarify whether this is the positioning. I'll just start with the two of you quickly and then come into the studio because I want brief answers. Are you suggesting then that the only form of redemption currently for the MPP would be if Kennedy Agyapong maybe gets the nod ahead of Dr. Bawumia? That would be the only reprieve to sort of put the MPP in any position to even contemplate breaking the 8. Suleimana, quick answer on that, very briefly. And same to you, Dr. Osai Kwapo.
Well, I think it's not a straightforward thing to say an absolute yes to that because
But you lean more towards yes.
Well, I think that given the track record and given, you know, over the period, the pronouncements of Bawumia compared to what has happened, I really feel strongly that there will be credibility issues in terms of, you know, putting him up as the person to break the 8.
All right. Okay. Dr. Osai Kwapo.
For me, the question of the redemption is more of Alan's departure is already hurting them, or will potentially hurt them. They don't need any more hurts. That if Honorable Kennedy doesn't win, he still somehow sticks with the party.
All right. For those of you out there, as we cap off this conversation, we'd like to know: would you vote for an independent presidential candidate? Would you vote for a third wheel, a third force? But coming to you in the studio, I don't know whether you're contemplating coming back to the fray in terms of the political terrain, and whether you would actually be contesting. But what is your take on this?
I think there's always based on trends and events. But the key thing that we need to, I want to respond to, is the fact as to whether there is a possibility of a third political force emerging or not. I think that possibility is real, because all the things that we have enumerated as being against it are certainly surmountable in this period. When we talk about organization, what we are really talking about is monetization of the political process. And one of the reasons why the external forces have not made headway is because they're very poorly financed and don't have the finances to lay out the organization. If it's organization, sometimes these smaller parties know how to organize even better than the bigger ones, because they can do more with less money. But if you get past that critical threshold of what do you need to put up a credible campaign, and what I mean by that is not credible in terms of the message, but credible in terms of the ordinary voter who sees that, oh, all of a sudden, these people have 250 pickups. They have offices here. You only need about $2-3 million for that. Are you with me? So if people who are coming into the domain of independent candidature have those resources, all of a sudden the issue of I'll be wasting my vote will no longer be there for those kinds of voters, because they will see the apparatus that is the same as the others have. Not to mention that internally also, there are a lot of MPs who were pushed out because of monetization. In other words, the money was used to get them out of popular positions. If those people decide to contest independent, it will also be another
It
issue
will have
altogether.
an impact.
Yes.
Gentlemen, hold for me. Let's cross over to Nana Boakye Adam. He's speaking on the same matter. He is in Kumasi, and we are asking the question about whether the residents of Kumasi would actually give that third force any chance at all. Nana Boakye, if you can hear me, please take it over.
How we have had the MPP and the NDC take over Ghana for almost 3 decades now. Is it really possible for an individual to stand out and say he can be the formidable third force?
I mean, yes, because right now, just as I was saying, Ghanaians are calling for a third force. It's been long overdue, but the problem is now that who could that third force be? Because at least you have to ascertain the political might, the clout, the experience, the exposure, what the person can really put on the table. Does the person have a roadmap towards liberating this country beyond what the NPP and the NDC have done over the course of 3 decades? So, of course, yes, if Ghanaians should find...
Would it not be a difficult task for any other person?
You see, one thing is that I thank God for the lives of most Ghanaians of late, because in those days, around the early 90s, around the 92s up to the early 2000s, you get to realize that politics or politicians were more or less like a court. Only few Ghanaians were so politically sensitive and active, right? So the level of discourse, the narrative, people were not so much interested. But now, because of the fact that literacy rates are, climbing higher, the pedestal, you get to realize that people are now becoming politically conscious. Even the average Ghanaian now on the street of Ghana is becoming politically really conscious. So the fact that Ghanaians are now becoming politically conscious, they will now begin to move from that extreme kind of partisan affiliation. For instance, if you look at the New Patriotic Party, what is happening in their party right now, there is no cohesion, there is no unity, and now they cannot even present any formidable candidate that Ghanaians will really root for. If you do the mathematics from a citizen vigilante aspect, you guys realize that the person that the Akaba want to root is not somebody Ghanaians are calling for. If you go to the NDC, somebody like the ex-president Mahama, Ghanaians knows his deeds and what he has done over the course of time. It is not anything to write home about. So should a worthy candidate emerge, I know for a fact that Ghanaians will go for such a person, regardless of the fact that, because if you look at the Ashanti region, for instance, if you go to the market women, this is the heart, the central business district, they are now saying that the MPP is more or less taking them for granted because they feel like, in quotes, should they even present, an animal, they will still vote for the animal even at the expense of a human being. But